Stream might be a little behind. We'll see. But we are rolling. Let's make sure that messages about being live are up. We're going to be diving into this soon. Very excited to see how folks have chosen to attack this meta. I am a little more pessimistic. Also, I can hear myself very faintly. Oh no, it's coming from my phone. This happens sometimes. I'm curious to see how people are going to tackle the meta. I think it's going to be a lower impact in terms of how the buffs have affected things compared to some of the past GPs. Certainly, the biggest impact of buffs on the overall format was the buff patch that we got this time last year, because it was the first time we ever got a buff patch, and so there was just hits for Theros, hits for Uldun, hits for Hyperpop, and those made some big waves. Menelaya was a big hit from that. I'm trying to remember other major hits from that buff patch. It's actually kind of escaping me. Oh my goodness. Why? It's because they've all rotated out, so I'm just completely drawing a blank on any of these cards that got buffed. Goodness gracious, this is bothering me that I can't think of other major impacts of the 2025 March buff patch. Because I remember Menelaya. Menelaya was one of the big ones. Wow, I'm genuinely drawing a blank. I'm gonna pull up the GP archive. I want to see where we were at this time last year. Because it was, Philippe won with an unnerfed Skotha. Was there anything in Philippe's deck that got buffed? I don't think so. I think it was all stuff that was already doing well. Prov got second place with mono green. And of course, that was leaning on the buffed Menelaya for a lot of work. I believe Lee was on. Yeah, Lee was on. No, it was on JJ Mac. Not anything that necessarily got buffed. Yeah, maybe it was just Menelaya that really rocked the format. Nothing really in Consonance that got buffed and saw play there. Consonance was pretty much unchanged. AO, Harmony. I don't think Harmony with Nature got a change in the buff patch. I don't think that really was affected, if I remember correctly. I think it was nerfed after this because it was still a 1-mana card then. Kilgaris, was also on mono green. Chip was on Aqua Crew. Was this deck on anything that got buffed? Was it seriously just Menelaya was the only impactful thing out of the buff patch last time, or this time last year? Am I seriously misremembering how much it actually impacted the format? Yeah, wow. Really, the only thing at top cut that really made waves was Menelaya. Goodness, I cannot believe I misremembered the buff patch having more impact overall. I don't remember if the subsequent buff patch really rocked the boat too much. I remember Chip won that buff patch with blue-black. Not on any Cyberos cards that got buffed here. I made top cut with the Corpse Pyre Fiend buff. There certainly was that, but I don't think anyone else was on anything quite to that level. I think the Fiend was the major buff of that season. Yeah, nothing really in Zangi's list. Mono black integrate with or like the black integrate package just got a big buff in Corpse Pyrophene was the major thing there. And then I think this was the GP where we finally saw Earthly Penchants. Or no, Earthly Penchants I think was already 2 for this GP. Welcome in, Tiny Miner. I don't know if I know who you are off of the screen name. Yeah, I don't know if the buff patches have really shaken things up. I think really the buff patch that had the most impact was Everrhyme, because that was the Envoy buff patch, and Envoy was a monumental buff, a full-on redesign, and Envoy really shook up the format something fierce, as evidenced by the fact that the Top Cut finals was 2 completely different Envoy strategies between dedicated aristocrats and the Envoy combo. Envoy, I'm surprised that folks have not rushed to get this promo, because I feel like Envoy promo is a really coveted thing right now. So we'll see if anyone brings Envoy this month. It had a very minimal showing back in January. It was completely absent last month, which I think it took a lot of people off guard. I feel like people are not wanting to run into it in Worlds, but the only way you guarantee to dodge Envoy stuff in Worlds is to start really jamming it this month to really push it to its limits. Because if Envoy does really well this month, I have to imagine if it does too dominant of a performance, it will get a little knock going into the World Championships. And if not, I think Envoy is probably going to be one of the decks to beat going to Worlds. I think Aristocrats will be in a very comfortable position because it really lost nothing in the Uldoon rotation. Like, none of the creatures that the deck was playing rotated out. The most we've really seen in terms of nerfs since the Envoy win was the hit 2 Envoy, which doesn't really impact the Aristocrats plan beyond the fact that you can't get the Envoy trigger off of Bind Life to steal, which is a rather minimal hit overall. And then otherwise, it was the hits to Hollowed Chamber, which is not awful. Is this the... What the hell was the pre-nerfed version? Oh, right, the treasures are tapped. Yeah, Hollow Chamber nerf is somewhat relevant to that deck, and then otherwise the only hit that the deck really suffered was to Smiling Sludge, just making it so that way Graveyard Hate actually meaningfully stops it. So this deck is still pretty strong. It's mostly just people believing in it that seems to have waned and resulted in Envoy falling off, but no one came with it last month. People might be expecting it less this month. We'll have to see if anyone has decided to seize on that opportunity. I certainly think folks are going to have their eye on Envoy going into this GP and going into Worlds as well. Going into this month as well, I think Dragon Control is still very real, and that should come as no surprise. Caillou has put up 2 deck lists out of the 3 deck lists so far this month are Caillou playing Jeskai Dragon Battle, or not even Battle, just Jeskai Dragon Control. I still instinctively want to call it Dragon Battle, but the battles have really taken a backseat at this point. And realistically, Caillou's list was less in on the battles because it was just Clash at Orith Cross and Path of Scales, and the Path of Scales are less appealing now that they have 1 more defense, so it's harder to chip away at them. Countermeasures and Eltanon no longer work as... countermeasures and Offset Daemon no longer work as effective... I'm very pulled together. Ukius Crusaris and countermeasures no longer work as effectively to clear battles, especially with Path of Scales just being so much more difficult to properly defeat. And that draw trigger getting you less overall value, even if it gets to dig a little deeper and give you more powerful selection. just not as effective in that regard. So certainly, uh, not much reason to be on as much of a dedicated battles plan. But Clash at Orith Cross still amazing. Iviana, an amazing win condition in her own right. Offset Damon still a very powerful card. So yeah, there's still a lot to like about Jeskai Dragons. Hey Prov, welcome in. Yeah, I think the two decks that I'm most anticipating in this field are Jeskai Dragons and some form of Envoy Aristocrats. I think those are going to be the two big decks of the tournament. Just loosely estimating where things are going. I think people are going to bring a lot of more unexpected things. I think we could see people trying to iterate more on the mono black shell that Nyx did really well with back in January. I think we could see folks explore some of the more aggro plans a bit more. I would not be surprised to see the green white shell show up in a bit of a less life gain centric build. Would not be surprised to see black red aggro explored a little more, because Caillou certainly was putting some work in with that deck last month, and certainly still looks good. Nothing really changed for that deck, so that deck still gets to exist in the way that it did last month. Lots of things kicking around in the field, but yeah, I think Iviana and Envoy of the Fallen are going to be the two big cards of the month in terms of just things that close out the game by way of slamming the door in your opponent's face. And the best thing about both Iviana and Envoy is that they don't need to be slamming the door in your opponent's face right away. They can still be very effective just by way of getting some value in the moment. And then if left unchecked, they will end things before your opponent really has a say. Which is just something that's very nice about Iviana for the control decks, Envoy for the more combo-oriented decks. We'll see how much both of them show up, but I have my estimations on where things are going. So we'll see where things land. We are currently at 20. We're going to be at 20 still. I know PTM's trying to get a deck in last minute. I know I saw that we have Tremor also trying to get in, so we might have 22. We might have 22. We'll see where things go if we do actually get 22 here. I am going to be very curious to see how this field shapes up. I did not build my own deck. It's been a while since I have played a deck that was not my own creation. But I very much just kind of felt like this format feels not solved by any measure, but I feel like better deck builders than me have really pinpointed the best things to be doing in this field. And so, especially if I'm gearing up for my very first World Championships, I just kind of want to keep things simpler, not try and break open the format by any measure. If I'm trying to break open the format, catch people off guard, that's what next month is for, when we're actually diving into Worlds. For now, I kind of want to get familiar with a thing that I think is going to be a major force going into Worlds, and then really get a feel for how much I think that will actually matter. So, and we'll get into that pretty early in the stream, because I am the third deck list online. So now we just kind of wait for another minute or two. We should be ready to roll soon. And I'll remember to drop the waiting on decks text. Sometimes I'm a little slow on the draw there, but I will remember. It will be addressed. That much I can be mostly certain of. Just finished meditating, sleeping soon. We'll see the decks tomorrow. Caillou has really been brewing a storm. Yeah, Caillou has been just constantly cooking. Certainly Caillou sort of experiencing his resurgence and being able to participate in the format is just a huge boon. Caillou's such a skilled deck builder, such a skilled player, really, really displaying why he has earned the pedigree he has in the format. The league results kind of speak for themselves, I think, to a certain degree. And I may or may not have my own element of glazing Caillou a little bit when it comes to the deck I have chosen to submit. Well, we'll get into that, but I have decided not to go for a descriptive deck list name for once. So it is that time. I think we are just waiting on the submissions to get locked. I am waiting to see Scribble chime in. You got PTM gearing up. Got one more player. Oh, we got CFT Sock. Oh my goodness. Talk about a blast from the past. CFT Sock locked in. Oh, hell yeah. When was CFT Sock last around? I could have sworn that was a name that was really kicking around, like, earlier on. I'm just kind of hopping through, trying to see him. I'll find it eventually. When was CFT Sock? Maybe I'm misremembering when CFT Sock was active here. Oh, deck lists are locked. I think pairings are up. Looks like PTM did get in at the last minute. So we are at 22 players in the field. Yeah. We are in. We got 22 players in the field. It's Chipmunk versus Opakana, Platy People versus Itai, Catalyst versus Viola, myself versus Epid, Kumarak versus Ricky, Crush versus All Who Wander, Zangi versus Cat and Tree, PTM versus CFT Sock 3, Provocative versus Scribble, H Good versus Caillou, and Silver versus Tremor. So I will get that waiting on decks text off the screen here, and we'll dive into where the format's at. Thank you for reminding me to remove that, Chip. We're starting with Chip's deck. Someday I'm going to find you and I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you. God damn it. All right. Hell yes. Chip figuring out what I really wanted to try and make work and just could not for the life of me make sense of. I have wanted to try, since the Clash at Mistrit Vale change, I have been wanting to try and figure out how to make Clash work with something like Gaigeka. I could not make it work. It was one of a couple different decks that I could not quite get to land where I wanted it to land. But it looks like Chip has figured it out. So this is sort of a Teamer Tempo Spellslinger deck. We got 8 creatures here between 2 copies of Cascade Channeler. Nice little solid Prowess 1-drop. If we can cast 3 non-creature spells in a turn, that'll let you make another 1-mana 1/1 with Prowess, though it will not retain the ability to copy itself. It will be named Cascade Channeler. Playset of Savvy Smith, 2-mana 2/2 that gets to do one of 3 very powerful things when you're using an instant or sorcery. And a pair of Dawnsworn Survivors, which here seem less about casting and more about, you know, doing what Survivor has been known to do, which is you pitch it to any of your effects that let you discard, and then when you cast your second spell each turn, you get to pick it right back up to your hand. So very good when you're trying to sling a bunch of spells for Cascade Channeler and Savvy Smith. Savvy can discard your Dawnsworn Survivors, and then you can discard it to some of your other effects as well. Otherwise, your primary threats are Gaigeka, Tide of Victory, handy little powerful vehicle here that Once you've cast 3 instants or sorceries while it's around, it gets to pick up Flying, Vigilance, and Trample. And then once it has all 3 of those keyword counters, it has hexproof and is an artifact creature permanently. So very difficult permanent to pick off. Everyone's sweating at the sight of CFT Sock in the GP. I know the tales, though I was struggling to find the specific GPs where CFT Sock was really rocking things. I do know the tales. Other big threat from Chip here is Clash at Mistrit Vale, changed to no longer spit out soldiers whenever you cast spells, and no longer pick up spells from your graveyard, but it's actually gone down to 4 defense from 5, and when it drops down to halfway, it gives your creatures prowess, which is really strong when Cascade Channeler already has prowess. It just grows twice as fast when it can spit out more tokens that also have prowess that gets to really let you run over the board. Savvy Smith spits out tokens that can really go crazy with Clash at Mistrit Vale. The Clash itself gets to spit out up to 2 tokens a turn cycle, because if you cast an instant on your opponent's turn, you still get to make another soldier token on their turn. And as a result, there are 17 instants here. There's a playset of Discerns alongside not much else actually in the way of card selection. I was really expecting there to be more card selection here, but really just Discern. No discard card selection as well. So really leaning on Savvy Smith to pitch these Dawnsworn Survivors, it looks like. Oh, no, sorry. There is also Stargazing at sorcery speed here. This is also going to be very good for digging deeper, getting rid of Dawnsworn Survivors, so you can get some more value out of your Dawnsworn Survivors. So that is going to be 8 1-mana cantrips, with Discern also getting some graveyard value. There's some solid burn spells here. 1 copy each of Shock and Thistral Charm, as well as a playset of High Voltage and 1 Terminal Impact, and 1 Coordinated Shot. A lot of one-ofs, but no Get Your Wish is a little surprising here. Take care, Prof. See you in the GP. If we get to fight each other. It's been a while. There's also some solid stack interaction, 3 copies of Ensorcel, 1 Overrule Will. There's Thistral Charm, gets to be some flexible removal and or counter magic as well. Can also copy up tokens. Not going to be too relevant, but you could copy up a Cascade Channeler token. You could, in a pinch, copy up the soldiers off of Clash or the constructs off of Savvy Smith to put a little more pressure on the board at instant speed. And then there's also 3 copies of Forced Ejection for some more all-purpose board interaction. So lots of instants, lots of spell slingery stuff. This is backed up by a 22-land mana base, getting around the lower land count through the playsets of Stargazing and Discerns, certainly. 1 each forest and mountain with 2 islands and a playset of Primal Fissures. I'm sometimes a little skeptical of having as many fetches as you have basics, but certainly in decks like this where you have things like Stargazing, Savvy Smith, where you can loot away extra fetches when you no longer have fetchable targets, is a nice little consolation. So certainly a deck like this, I like the more even split of basics and fetches more. Otherwise, playset of Clearwater Grotto and of Misty Peak, as well as 2 Urban Jungles, blue being the clear color of choice, with both green and red being secondary, evidenced by Misty Peak, Clearwater Grotto both being 4 ofs, and then Urban Jungle being the 2 of. There's also 2 of each of the blue paths here, those being Rousing Path and Sodden Path. So higher emphasis on early turn plays. Definitely want to maximize untapped lands on those first couple of turns, so the additional paths makes sense there. Awkward that these paths cannot be your 3rd land to help you really get to a consistent Gaigeka on turn 3, but that's a small price to pay, and these are certainly better lands to draw when you start to flood out a bit. Which, with all of these ways of digging through your deck, is not an unreasonable thing to expect. Sideboard has 3 copies of Astraling for control matchups. Can't be countered is really strong, as is having it phase out to dodge targeted removal and sweepers. 1 additional copy of Shock, seemingly for aggro-oriented matchups. Also pretty good at chipping away Clash at Mistrit Vale in a pinch. 3 copies of Frag for more high-end removal and also artifact removal. A trio of Golden Bloom of the Silenced to check any potential problem permanent. Trio of Faces of the Faceless as the anti-graveyard card of choice, and 2 copies of Advance of Fire and Faith, seemingly here as another anti-aggro tool, can sort of split up your priorities across multiple cards. Advance is definitely one of the ones I have struggled to find myself wanting in these sorts of decks because it has such an anti-synergy with things like Gaigeka, like Savvy Smith, where it isn't an instant or sorcery, so it does not trigger those effects like you might want it to, but this is still just such a solid, flexible Twin Bolt effect. It's hard to deny an Arc Trail for 2, ultimately, even if it's at sorcery speed. So that is Temur Geka. Excited to see how this fares for Chip. Certainly a deck I have not seen Chip explore in the past. I'm very excited to see how Chip navigates this one. Up next, we have Scribbles, Betraying My Conscience. This is a mono green ramp deck from the looks of it. This is 35 creatures, 25 lands. We've got 4 Primal Fissures, 19 Forests, 2 Burgeoning Nebulas. I'm a little surprised by the Primal Fissures in the monocolored deck, but it does look like there might be some reasons to want lands in the graveyard, so I can understand it. We've got 8 1-drops in a playset of each of Huskforger Acolyte and Andir Wild Soul. Certainly Wild Soul, a thing that wants you to have a land in your graveyard in a pinch. Playsets of Ursus Minora and Blightstalker at 2. Another reason to have a Primal Fissure. Go get those multiple landfall triggers per turn. A playset of Redeemer of Hollowed Flesh at 3. And then we jump up to 5 with Aurora Buffer Exec as a 1-of. 2 copies of Tumultivore at 6. Very powerful stompy top-end card. And then sort of this big stompy ramp shell really gets online with a playset of Ursus Majora, which gives you some ramp through its Path of Prosperity. Not actually a creature, but gets to get you to accelerate your mana a little bit and is just a massive threat when it comes down as a 7-mana 7/7 that can give itself +2/+2 and trample for each landfall trigger. Playset of Rex Tyrannos, which is a very solid card selection tool. The fact that this is 35 creatures, 25 lands, Path of Primacy is always going to offer you any of the 3 cards that you look at, which is a really great boon for improving your consistency overall. And then 7-mana 7/5 that with Trample that gets to cheat another creature from your hand into play tapped and attacking. Really good when you are skewing a little more towards these top-end things like Ursus Majora, Rex Tyrannos, Tumultivore, and of course, Alwanor the Humbled Star, which gives you a little more ramp by way of Path of Providence, and is just a haymaker of a 10-mana 10/10 that gets to drop another 10/10 into play. Not always the best at really pushing through, but 10/10 with Trample can really do some work, and if you just have that 10/10 Spirit token do some work over a couple turns, it doesn't need to have Trample. It can just absolutely pave over any blocker that your opponent tries to throw in front of it. So, very interesting package here. Ursus Majora putting basic lands into play is a little awkward with the 2 Burgeoning Nebulas, but certainly, turn 1 Huskforger Acolyte into turn 2, float a green off of your basic land, play Burgeoning Nebula, then pay the green plus your Huskforger Acolyte mana into Ursus Majora, replay that basic. It even puts the land into play untapped. So if you have something that you want to do that's like 1 mana less than the total mana that you have, and you have an extra basic in hand, you can just Ursus Majora, draw a card, put that basic into play, and then do the thing that you were going to do without wasting any mana, which is really nice. Sideboard is a playset of Hungry Blob for artifact and enchantment decks. Playset of Astraling for those control matchups, of course. 2 copies of Plaguebane Hulk to pick off troublesome non-creature permanents. No real interaction on the main deck here, so this is something that is very needed. 2 copies of Golden Bloom of the Silenced for any troublesome permanents, and 3 copies of Astral Displacer for any big problem cards that you might need to really shut off in the early to mid-game turns. Up next, we have my deck, and I am fully aware that Caillou's the better deck builder. As always, I do the double naming here because when GPs end, the deck name does erase the player name. So I do this so that way when people are checking deck lists, in hindsight, they can easily see which deck was mine, and I wanted to make sure I preserved the fact that I am fully aware which one of us between Caillou and I is the better deck builder. I am playing card for card the most recent iteration of Jeskai Dragon Control played by Caillou and put into the 5-0 league results in the Revolution Decklists channel. I cannot explain every single deck building choice that Caillou has made here because Caillou made those, not me. But I will say, I'm of the opinion, I think this deck, I think we're going to see month number 3 of Jeskai Control just being one of the best things to do in the field. The needle has shifted over from battles to Iviana over the course of this time, and certainly the changes at the top of this month really helped cement that leaning into battles is not as good as leaning into Iviana, because the best ways to clear your battles have been nerfed, and the rewards for pushing a lot of damage to your battles are pulled back a little bit because defeating Clash at Worthcross isn't as important. Defeating Path of Scales is a little harder, and the value's less overwhelming on its enter trigger. And then Clash at Mistrit Vale is not as snowbally as it used to be, and certainly doesn't get you value when you target it with a removal spell. So, battles have peeled back. The removal spells that pointed at battles, the best ones being hit, hurts that strategy as well. I do think Clash at Orthcross remains absolutely nuts. I did have moments of considering making adjustments from what Caillou had done for the league run. I ultimately decided that there were none that I could fully convince myself of feeling like they were necessary, so I made no decisions on adjusting things based on where Caillou was at. But I certainly do think that Caillou's build of this deck is just really polished, really solid. Obviously, Caillou will be better at piloting this deck than I am, and given the deck list name we can see below mine, I have a feeling I'm not the only one on Jeskai Dragon Control. But yeah, certainly Caillou has really rocked this deck last month and will presumably be rocking this deck again this month. And I want to get in on the Dragon Control while the getting's good. Props do also have to go to both Dr. Chipmunk for really pioneering and pushing the value inherent in the Jeskai shell through the battle control shells, and also props to Silver Parabellum for really being Iviana's champion when nobody else was. And from my understanding, was the one who swayed Caillou on Iviana, which led to Caillou proving that Iviana was being slept on last month. So yeah, sideboard has a lot of flexibility, courtesy of 4 1-drop slots, 4 1-ofs for the Iviana package, and then a bunch of 2s and 3s. Additional copy of Deafening Clarion to go with the 3 in the main. Otherwise, 3 Thistral Charm, 3 Sis Call. For flexible interaction, can also copy some tokens in a pinch. Can copy up the Offset Daemon Overflow tokens in a pinch, though that's not really why you want to board it in. Sis Call, really good value engine against control decks. Limbing Psyhawk having a lot of flexible checks into various strategies in the field. Helia Layspire being just such a good anti-graveyard tool, with some additional value against faster decks as just being a solid blocker to buy you some time. I will be fully honest here before I move on, because I don't want to spend too long on this deck, because it was not one of my own innovation. 3 Become 1 was very much the thing that fully motivated me to sit down and play this deck this month. I have been wanting to figure out a 3 Become 1 shell since this card got into the format last September, and I just have not been able to make sense of it over all of this time. I came very close to trying this with some of the black hand attack spells this month. Just draw step hand attacking is really rude, and I think it's time for my villain arc, but I have not gotten to that point yet. I have not been able to find a list that I am truly comfortable with and confident in. But 3 Become 1 is just a good draw spell, and getting to do stuff like cast the Draconis Magistus Adventure through the free cast a spell with mana value 3 or less, because adventures do count for that. Yes, I've double checked the rulings on that. Yeah, I think it's really sweet. 3 Become 1 being here as a 2 of was just the final nail in the coffin to convince me that I've gotta get in on this Dragon Control action. And sure enough, this certainly looks like, oh, there are differences here. Okay. It looks like the difference here primarily is Terminal Impact is only a 1 of in the main, and the Thistral Charms have returned to the main deck from the sideboard, with the other 3 Terminal Impacts slotting over to the sideboard. Otherwise, this is the list that Caillou just 5-0'd with nearly card for card. Certainly the full 75 is identical. It's just that 3 card swap between Thistral Charm and Terminal Impact, which I think is reasonable. Thistral Charm is certainly a very reliably strong interactive tool. In a pinch, this being able to make 2/2/2s off of Clash at Orith Cross is certainly nice. Copying the Knight tokens off of Clash at Orith Cross is also pretty solid. Yeah, maybe Thistral Charm does still want to be in the main. I don't know. I like Terminal Impact a lot. This is a deck that does get to make a lot of land drops, so having access to the full 4 Terminal Impacts in the main is nice, but I am not as seasoned a player of this deck as Caillou is, so I suspect Caillou has the better rationale here than me just kind of copying his homework. But yeah, Offset Daemon, Draconos Magistus, Iviana, Clash at Orith Cross, like it's just so much juice. Overrule Will as the other counterspell alongside Draconos Magistus, but there's also 3 copies of Silent Lakefront as both solid early fetches and counterspells. Between 3 Silent Lakefront and 3 Primal Fisher, this is another deck with even fetch to basic counts that gets to make up for that with the 2 copies of Stargazing, letting you loot away extra fetches later on in the game. Overrule will milling yourself has some nice value because it can tee up your seafloor treasures by either milling treasures or just getting you to surface quicker. Can mill over Offset Daemons, so the ones that you play later just have free value already on offer there. There's just so much to like about this deck. It is such a clean 75 that I'm not surprised that the changes here from Caillou's list have nothing to do with changing what is present in the 75 overall. I think this is a very strong 75 in its totality. So yeah, 4 deck lists deep, and we've already hit the double up because I copied Kai's homework. Up next, we've got Crush on Green-White Martial Honesty. Crush has been really rocking the Honesty tokens deck this season. We've got 4 Looming Psyhawk in the main. Crush making a very strong statement about where he feels tokens are going to be this month. We've got playset of Resolute Reinforcements as the 2-drop slot, alongside a playset of The Ruins Awaken and a playset of Advance of the Sainted March. At 3, there is Faithline Marshal, Looming Psyhawk, and Commander of the Vow, alongside Magical Leaves, and the namesake part of the deck, Honesty, able to really leverage you putting multiple creatures in play every turn to just start spiraling board buffs turn by turn by turn. There is a playset of Complementarity to really spike the board hard in a pinch, as well as Fateful Ascent as the go-to removal spell here. 20 lands total, which doesn't surprise me too much. The curve kind of is 2s and 3s and not much else. Playsets each of Primal Fisher, Thicketed Path, Temple of Origins, Forests, and Plains. No shocks here. Don't really want to put pressure on the life total, which gives you more favor into other aggro matchups for sure. Sideboard is 3 copies of Route Navigator to stop people with those pesky tutor effects. Not sure if that's too relevant, because I don't think people are really searching up things other than basics right now, but we could see it potentially matter. Playset of Renounce of the Worldly as the artifact and enchantment removal of choice. Playset of Constrict, which I'm very curious to know what this might be here for. Then a playset of Lunate Charm to pick off some bigger creatures, give your permanent hexproof to stop targeted removal, and also have the flexibility of being the Graveyard Hate of choice. Yeah, Crush has put some decent results up with the Green-White Honesty shells, so certainly I'm keen to see how it fares this month as well. Opakana also running back something from last month, running back the Astarian Red-White Tokens deck that pushes a little higher up the curve to get some of these splashier 4s and 5s. Once again, this is going to be a playset of Kitsune Matriarch kicking off the curve of this red-white deck. 2-drops, no 2-drop creatures, but that's because we've got a playset of Flags on High, 3 Advance of the Sainted March, and 4 Ruins Awaken to make those tokens on 2. Nothing going on 3 other than 3 copies of Casus Belli as one of the removal spells of choice here. Able to give creatures +1/+0 while picking off a pesky creature or planeswalker. And then the rest of the curve just jumps up. 4 mana, we have Ardor, Forefront of Freedom, to anthem the tokens, give them haste, and force them to attack each combat if able, while spitting out tokens on each of your own combats. Coupled with Leonis Excurtus, which makes 3 1/1s at instant speed for 4 mana, and then can eventually come down as an 8 mana 8/8 that anthems your creatures. And then at 5, there's 3 Astarian Architect War, uncounterable threat that just spits out 3 1/1s each combat, gives them lifelink haste, and they go away at end of turn. Just really annoying way of just pushing damage, gaining you life, turn by turn by turn. And by itself can really start to snowball advantage, especially when you've got this alongside something like a Casus Belli. And then 2 copies of Aviva Grip Exec, always a card that gives me trouble. Another uncounterable threat here that when it enters or attacks, you make a 2/2 that impulse draws whenever it connects. So another 5 mana 5/5 that can really spiral the board on its own if left unchecked. That is all backed up by 3 copies of Terminal Impact as more interaction, as well as playset of Sunwrath Charm. Not only a bit more interaction as 2 mana deal 2 gain 2, but also a bit of consistency improvements. You can loot away something in your hand to draw 2 cards at instant speed, or you can have this rebuy a creature with mana value 2 or less. In this deck in particular, that really just buys back Kitsune Matriarch, but considering how powerful Kitsune Matriarch is, there's not a ton of shame in spending 2 mana to get it back at instant speed, especially if you know you're going to make a lot of tokens over future turns. Mana base here is 2 copies of Lacufe Observatory. Probably going to be tapped pretty often. This is untapped reliably on the first turn or so. Kitsune Matriarch definitely appreciates the extra untapped white sources on turn 1. But there are only 8 basic planes in the deck, so 10 planes overall out of the 24 lands here. Having it untapped in later turns is not as big of a priority, but this can convert creature cards in your graveyard to additional tokens, and 15 creatures, not an unreasonable count to potentially get some additional 1/1s off of this later on in the game as needed. Otherwise, 4 Wind-Beaten Stones, 2 Torrid Path, and then 8 of each basic, no Primal Fissures here. No fetches at all here. Sideboard has 2 copies of Aegis of Grace, seemingly as the removal magnet of choice. Hard to remove other problematic permanents when this is sticking around. Hard to get hit with targeted hand attack when this is sticking around. Aegis of Grace, definitely a card that I have felt iffy on, but as folks gravitate towards Deafening Clarion and Clash at Orith Cross rather than gravitating towards Nightfall, Aegis of Grace does get a little boon there as people lean on Nightfall less. And certainly we have not seen Nightfall yet, 6 deck lists in out of 22. 2 copies of Shatter the Sigil as the artifact or enchantment removal of choice. This also gets to protect your Astarians, Vivivas, and Ardors, which is really nice. Going to protect Kitsune Matriarch in a pinch. Solid, flexible sideboard tool. Vow to Conquer as the 3 mana uncounterable deal 3 gain 3. Very interesting Vow to Conquer here, not the recently nerfed Ukius Crusaris that can now go face. I suppose the creature on the top end just not as valuable as this being uncounterable. And then 3 copies each of Doctrine of Cleansing Flames, more artifact removal that also has the flexibility to be additional token generation when needed. 3 Pest Problems for mass token and artifact, mass artifact and enchantment token generation decks. And then 3 Crucible of the Burning Sun as the graveyard hate tool of choice. Moving on from Opakana's deck, we've got Itai Yukul's CYB Academy Special, learn an account from 2 to 4. Yes, of course, this is the Cyberos final standard GP. It will get one final standard tournament next month with Worlds, but as far as the standard GPs go, this is the last Cyberos GP. So we've got a playset of Venture Capitalist and 3 Inner Rings Pupil here for this black-red colorless deck. We've got 6 planeswalkers here, 2 copies of Selise Syndicate Pariah, 1 Gyama Scion of Kage, and then 3 Ziv Replispark. It's been a while since he has really gotten to take the spotlight, and this is the last chance he's got. 2 copies of Terminal Impact in the sorcery slot. Playsets of each of Shigani Manor Burns and Tithe to the Machine. SMB and Venture Capitalist both capable of jumping you up to 4 mana on turn 3, hence the counting from 2 to 4. If you can get an artifact into play turn 1 or can do it for free on turn 3, Venture Capitalist gets to come into play on 2 and then convert that artifact into mana on turn 4. And then Shigani Manor Burns just spits out a treasure that guarantees you get to 4 mana on turn 3 every time. One of the other things you get jumping up to 4 mana for, besides some of those Planeswalkers and Innering's Pupil, is Tithe to the Machine, another card we haven't seen in a while. Very solid attrition engine to really just irritate your opponent out of existence. As well as 2 copies of Panic for some flexible removal and threat generation over time. And then the artifact package is very diverse here. We've got a playset of Lace Shards, further emphasizing the priority to jump to a 4-mana card on turn 3 here. And then otherwise, there's 3 copies of Stella's Journal, so something you can reliably get with Venture Capitalist on turn 2, so you can just have something you can freely guarantee will be sacrificed to Venture Capitalist to get you to 4 mana on turn 3. And then otherwise is something you can run out to refill your hand as you start to run out of gas. 1 copy each of Serrated Fossil as the hand attack of choice here. Golden Bloom of the Silence to pick off to disable pesky permanents. Waypoint Armillery to get you some solid little chump blockers as needed, or even attackers as needed, while also letting you dig for a land card. And then Faces of the Faceless as the anti-graveyard tool of choice. The nice thing of Venture Capitalist giving you the flexibility to run some of these utility tools like Golden Bloom of the Silenced and Faces of the Faceless in the main. Always a nice upside here. 24 lands here with 3 Sanguine Palace, 3 Gilded Court, very nice to see. You do want those colorless sources when you have colorless cards like Ziv and Tithe to the Machine kicking. 2 copies each of Coalesced Core and Coalesced Peaks to up the colorless mana generation count. Also, some solid mana fixing in a pinch at the cost of a bit of life. 1 copy of Warpway Rings off of the Venture Capitalist as needed, so you can hit land drops more reliably. 3 copies of Primal Fisher to go with that Warpway Rings, alongside 5 basics, 2 Swamps, 2 Mountains, 1 Wastes. A singleton copy of Opulent Vantage as a utility land here, just gains you a bit of life and taps for colorless. I don't think there are any cards with cycling that require mana of a specific color. Yeah, no, it is just a colorless utility land here. There is a card with cycling here, but Waypoint Armillery does not demand... Sorry, not Waypoint Armillery. Faces of the Faceless does not make certain colored demands in your deck list, so just purely for that bit of life gain. 3 copies of Temple of Origins can be nice in a pinch. Lets you convert the mana generated from Venture Capitalist or from Shigani Manor Burns into colorless mana, because you can tap the treasure token or the Venture Capitalist for blue, white, or green, and then your Temple of Origins can forcibly filter that into colorless in a pinch, so you can still reliably use your Temple of Origins drawback as an upside to improve the reliability that you can run out Ties to the Machine and Ziv. And then 1 copy of Erosive Path. Very, very diverse land base that we haven't gotten to see in a while because people just haven't been jamming colorless. Sideboard's got some 2s and 3s. We've got 2 copies of Karaz Leyspire as the anti-combo tool of choice. Can also name Pesky Control win con to just really lock someone out. 2 copies of Advance of the Umbral Bargain as the more general hand attack tool of choice, though Go Blank is also good at ripping away cards in the opponent's hand. And then there's 3 copies of Twilight Ambush for aggro matchups, Nightfall really good into aggro matchups as well as some mid-range decks, and then Advance of Fire and Faith, also just a nasty check into some smaller aggro decks. It has a very sweet black-red deck. I've been curious to know where Black-Red's going, because I don't think it really got a ton of respect last month after Scribble jammed it back in January, and this is a very fun direction to see this Black-Red shell going. Nice to see the colorless package of Ziv and Tithe getting one last hurrah. Nice to see people leveraging the consistency between Venture Capitalist, Shigane Manor Burns and Ley Shard. Ley Shard's last hurrah as well. So 12 different ways to get to 4 mana a turn ahead of schedule. Just very sweet overall. Props to Itai for this innovation. Up next, we've got Catalysts going 0-2 in 0 to the power of N. I am not going to get this joke. But this looks like it is a dedicated subroutine deck. We've got Groove Surfer, we've got Olus's Axiom. So Olus's Axiom is a level-up creature here that has not really gotten to see play, but is a 1-mana 0/2, can level it up for 1 in a red, and from there it's a 1/3. Whenever it hits a player, it has one of your subroutines run, and when you get and level it up 3 times, it's a 2/4 that runs one of your subroutines twice. That alongside Groove Server, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, of which there are 31 in the deck, you get to make a boost subroutine, which adds red whenever it runs. 2 copies of the Weft Heart here. So there's a slate green splash here for Weft Heart. And it looks like, yeah, there are some green subroutines in here. There's some green goodies in here besides Weft Heart. But Weft Heart going to be able to flip your token subroutines off of Groove Surfer into more relevant subroutines, can flip your 1 mana into 2 mana, into 3 mana, into 4. So each of the subroutines here gets to dig up the curve for Weft Heart. And it looks like there might be some additional enchantments over in the sideboard that Weft Heart can find in a pinch. Also gets to make its own enchantment token subroutine, so you can get some card advantage as needed. Instant package here is Playset of Shocks as some small removal, Deft Deflection as counterspell utility, Get Your Wish as the tutor package to really up the consistency of you finding your key subroutines alongside Weft Heart. And then A Journey Begins, letting you find any of your permanents with mana value 3 or less. So can't find the Weft Heart, can't find any of your 15 instants or sorceries, but can find 43 of your cards, which is going to be pretty reliable when you're looking at 5 cards deep in your deck. And those, not all 43. It's going to find 39, because one of these enchantments is also 4 mana. But 2 copies of Jump here. Can exile one of your other creatures or subroutines when it runs. One of any creature or subroutine. So you can blink out a token that your opponent has. You can blink out and reset one of your non-token subroutines to shift it over to a more favorable slot on your program. And it also just clears a blocker for a turn in a pinch. 4 copies of Iterate to generate some annoying blockers by way of Noop, the 3/3 with Defender that can be turned into a 5/5 with Vigilance, and then eventually turned into a massive avatar with Trample. There's also Recurse here. 3 mana subroutine. Whenever another subroutine you control enters, it runs. When it runs, you get an XX colorless construct artifact creature token, where X is the number of subroutines you control. So certainly one of the things that really pays off having something like Groove Surfer running, pays off just really this heavy devotion to subroutines. Certainly Recurse plus Groove Surfer also does a ton of powerful things, because whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Groove Surfer spits out a new subroutine that generates a red mana that lets you dig a little bit deeper. Weft Heart, you can downtick, make the subroutine token immediately impulse draw with Recurse, and Recurse is just going to spit out some massive tokens when it gets to run as well. And then a playset of Panic here at the top of the curve for some added removal and token generation to really just push over the top. Very solid, mid-rangey feeling deck despite the low curve. 23 lands here, 2 Primal Fissures. Looks like that's the only fetches here, but there are only 1 of each basic, so not a ton of basics to find with those fetches anyways. Playset of Gilded Court to really up the consistency of getting to play the things that you want when you want to. Playset of Misty Peak alongside 3 Clearwater Grotto and 2 Urban Jungle, and then 2 each of Rousing and Sodden Paths, and then 1 Meandering Path. So a slightly heavier lean on blue, and then red, seems. Which makes sense, you know, Olus's Axiom and Jump are the 1-drop permanents here. Red gets you Shock on one, gets you Weft Heart more reliably, gets you Groove Surfer early on. And then green, like outside of Journey Begins, doesn't have a ton of early value outside of Iterate. So certainly I can see why the colors balance out that way. Sideboard here is 2 Station of Sun's Radiance as the artifact removal of choice. This gets to be a bit of a prowess-like threat in a pinch, as well as being your artifact removal. 3 copies of Lunar Awe as targeted removal alongside 2 Terminal Impacts. A pair of Clicks as the token check of the deck's sideboard, and a playset of Syscall as the anti-control tool to get that same draw power. And then finally 2 Clash at Mistrit Vale to have the potential for just spiraling value through those tokens, and also the prowess available here can do some real work. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting deck to see perform. I'm very curious to know how the Teamer subroutine deck fares. I imagine Chipmunk is going to be watching this with particular interest as well. Up next, we've got Kumrak on Golgari midrange. Should come as no surprise. Kumrak has absolutely been rocking this deck and making little tweaks here and there as they find the paths that they like the most. So 4 copies of Huskforger Acolyte, 4 Exorcist of Errors, 3 Blightstalker, 4 Programmed Pursuer. I think that is the most I've seen it getting run. I am so used to this being a much lower count, but Programmed Pursuer is just value. And especially in multiples, this really does just kind of run over a game in terms of card advantage. 3 Life Hacker and 3 Inner Rings Pupil make up the top of the curve for the creature slot. 2 copies of Solis Syndicate Pariah in the main. 3 Twilight Ambush and 2 Sovereign's Execution as the targeted removal at instant speed, alongside 2 Revivified Wrath, so some more removal here. 2 copies of Duress as hand attack, and 2 Receives as a bit of value generation here. 26 lands, my goodness, between playset of Primal Fissure, Profane Grove, and Temple of Origins for that general fixing, as well as Forlorn Path, really emphasizing those first 2 turns there. 2 copies of Gallowsprout Timber as a creature land alongside 2 Heap Ludicon. Definitely the 4 toughness is a bit of a difficult threshold for some decks to deal with, so this can be a pretty safe thing to invest your time into, especially with 5 swamps and only 1 forest. The heavier swamp lean between the basics and Heap Ludicon helps your Gallowsprout Timbers be untapped earlier. Sideboard here is 1 each of Meteor Hellion, Femeros, Redeemer, and Twilight Ambush. Meteor Hellion as some additional value interaction into lower curve decks. Femeros Redeemer as a bit of more explosive value in grindier matchups. Twilight Ambush, the 4th copy for aggro matchups. 3 copies of Aspis Venethir for all of these token decks running around. Solis Syndicate Pariah, the remaining 2 copies for presumably those control matchups. The remaining 2 copies of Duress for control matchups and combo matchups. 2 copies of Go Blank for matchups where card advantage really becomes the key, and then also while being your graveyard check as needed. And then 3 Culling Ritual, nice, really consistent tool into all of these token decks. Hard that it misses out on things like Honesty at 3 mana. Those decks definitely like hitting the 3-drop spot on the curve, but this picks off so many tokens really reliably, so it can do a lot of really good things. Up next, we've got Viola's running it back completely unchanged because I had 0 time the past week. This is the black-red-green mid-range deck that they ran last month. So that's going to be 2 copies of Vardo, Revelin, Forever King, and 2 Zaya Record Chaser at 2, 2 Putragoyf and Precursor to Calamity and Meteor Hellion at 3, and then Chief Executive Dante, Hoenn of Champion, and Warden of Tremors at 1-ofs at the top of the curve. There's 2 Giyama Scion of Kage as well, and a playset of Liquidates and 2 Deadly Disputes here. And you might be wondering where all of these gold cards are coming from. This is a Golden Age deck. 3 copies of Golden Age at the start of the curve here to improve mana consistency and eventually get some value later on. 3 copies of Shigane Manor Burns to get some more value generation, help dig through things that are kind of rotting in your hand while ramping you up to some of your more explosive plays, and chipping away some damage to the opponent as needed. Deadly Dispute can dig you a bit deeper. Work Safety Violation, solid all-purpose removal. Terminal Impact is good uncounterable removal. Nightfall really does a lot to clean up early boards. This deck did pretty good, as I recall, last month. Had some hiccups here and there, but otherwise, Golden Age, not necessarily the key to the deck. This deck just gets to play good threats that people aren't really thinking about right now. Precursor to Calamity, Putrigoyf, Zaya, these things that just people are not ready for, and they get to play it alongside things like Hoenn Champion, Warden of Tremors, which have proven themselves to be really, really scary top-end tools. So, yeah, very good stuff. 24 lands here, 4 copies of Primal Fissure with a ton of basics here, 5 swamps, 5 mountains, 4 forests. That helps you improve the consistency of your deck alongside the Golden Age, so of course you want to be a heavy lean on basics here. 1 of each path, but no shock lands, so really getting to spare the life total here. 2 Vishanti District, so if you can get all of these basics into play as needed, those can come online much more reliably. And then 1 Gallows Sprout Timber here as a creature land in a pinch. Sideboard's a bunch of 2-ofs, and then the last copy of Nightfall. We've got Hungry Blob for artifacted enchantment matchups, Orith Cross Crusader as a bit of a life gain when needed bomb. 2 copies of Matoros Tyrannos to check non-creature, non-land permanents when played in lower quantities, and also be a way to prevent non-combat damage to you and itself on the top of your curve. 2 copies of Deimos Letheus as the hand attack of choice here. Very interesting choice. 2 Archival Storage as the graveyard hate of choice. 2 Moonlit Gateway as additional graveyard hate, as well as additional mana fixing consistency as needed. And then 2 Astral Displacer as the flexible hate piece when you need it to be. Good stuff. Prov is once again kicking around Penwrath Dispatcher. We've got the classic, I say classic, but certainly this has been something really surging about in the wake of the Cliques of Nyland patch, and we haven't got to see Prov in the format as much, but certainly Dispatcher has become Prov's thing since the Nyland buff patch, and this is definitely one of the more powerful cards to come out of that buff patch. So we've got playset of Huskforger Acolyte. We'll talk about the multiple copy cards first, and then we'll talk about the one-ofs. So playset of Huskforger Acolyte on 1, 3 Gilded Noon Entertainer on 2, 3 Fabricated Anomaly, Ironback Tyke, Redeemer of Hollowed Flesh, and Rosen Clad in Guilt at 3. A lot of consistent options at the 3 mana slot on curve, because Penwrath Dispatcher, when you swing with it and 2 other creatures, gets to find any 3-drop from your deck and put it into your hand, or put a creature with mana value 3 or less from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. So it can spit out these anomalies, Tykes, Redeemers, and Rosens on turn 4 or turn 3 pretty reliably. And then you also have to consider that all of these 3-drops are very good when you're on Huskforger Acolyte on turn 1. So it can really spiral those boards out of control very quickly. The one-ofs here are 1 each of Blightstalker, Genotype Splicer, and Masksmith. Much easier to find as these silver bullets when needed, courtesy of Penwrath Dispatcher finding 2-drops very reliably. And overall, yeah, it's just a very strong mid-range aggro-leaning creature suite. Can just really rush some scary threats into play, and if you cannot deal with these threats, they will run over the game. Non-creature spells here are a playset of Terminal Impact, a playset of Sanctum of Repression, and 3 Revolt at the Palace. Revolt, the other reason to really like the fact that this deck keeps its curve rather low. Besides Terminal Impact and Revolt itself, Penwrath Dispatcher is the only other non-land miss in the deck. So that is 22 creatures and 4 enchantments that you can hit off of Revolt at the Palace. And this is a deck that leverages the double strike mode very effectively. So yeah, Revolt is just such an explosive tool when you can get it online. And this is a deck that can get to it a little more consistently thanks to Huskforger Acolyte. 23 lands to see here. That is 4 forests, 2 mountains, and 3 plains, with a playset of Primal Fissures, 2 meandering paths, 2 thicketed paths, so really emphasizing the early green sources, and then 2 urban jungles and 4 verdant sanctums. So there is no land in this deck besides the plains or mountains that misses out on casting a turn 1 Huskforger. This is a deck that can get Huskforger into play very reliably, which is good stuff. Sideboard includes additional copies of some of those utility tools, another Blightstalker, another Genotype Splicer. There's 2 copies of Virtualized Onomastic for things that you really just don't want your opponent to let resolve. 1 copy of Graceful Finalizer as some enchantment removal as well as graveyard hate. that you can find off of your dispatchers and revolts. 3 copies of Looming Psyhawk as the anti-tokens tool of choice. 3 copies of End of Mutations as the anti-control tool. And then a playset of Astral Displacer because Prav has been hyping this card up. And certainly this is a deck that might be able to leverage it pretty effectively because you just push so much damage on the board so quickly that Displacer can reliably shut off your opponent's best way to stop you and push it back beyond when they'll have time to need it. Up next, we've got H-Squid. It's been a rough couple months, so I'm just stealing a list. This is the white-black... Oh, I see. This is the white-black Weathers list that Laurel just recently got a league trophy with. So this is a graveyard recursive white-black Thorn and Trial Too Late for Grace deck that is trying to pick up creature cards from your graveyard over and over again for some value. You've got Past Unresolved as some draw utility, and the mill is very powerful here. And then otherwise, it's Bind Life to Steal, Too Late for Grace, Thorn and Trial, 10 recursive tools here to get back your Rooftop Slinks and Sludge Drudges at 1, Catabolist and Mercenary of Dusk at 2, and then Gloomy Meteorologist and Stratus Fledgling at 3. So Slink, letting you just push some solid pressure early on while letting you pitch things that you want to cheat into play with Thorn and Trial and Too Late for Grace early on. And then if you can flip it over, can just really shred your opponent's hand. Sludge Drudge, really leveraging all of this graveyard recursion, can just put a ton of Exalted cards into play as you bring your creatures back over and over, and let one of your creatures just swing for a massive amount of damage as needed. Catabolist, able to leverage the constant bringing back of cards to bring itself back as well, and can make a ton of tick tokens as they come back and die, and come back and die, and come back and die. Mercenary of Dusk, able to fill your graveyard really reliably while being a very annoying early threat. And then Gloomy Meteorologist and Stratus Fledgling bridge us into the other portion of the deck, which is that the deck has 7 non-weather sideboard slots. So we've got 3 Corrupt Congressmen, 4 Duress, but otherwise we've got 2 Falling Ashes, which can exile cards from graveyards, and then you gain 2 life. You can use this in a pinch to exile something from your graveyard, so you can enable Catabolist. You can get one of your 2 copies of Hail to just anthem your creatures whenever they attack. One of your 2 copies of Sandstorm to just drain your opponent whenever you attack. And then there's 1 of each of Diamond Dust and Shadow Sky. And one of the really powerful things about this deck, given that there is a Catabolist here, is that you can get your weathers back from your graveyard as well as from your sideboard. So when you have a Gloomy Meteorologist or Stratus Fledgling enter, you can get Hail and play it and sacrifice your Falling Ashes, and then have another one of your Acclimate effects pick up the Falling Ashes, which lets you get back your Catabolists for more value. This is a very, very grindy deck. It is one where Diamond Dust and Shadow Sky are very possible top-end tools to make come alive here. 23 lands here, 4 Desolate Paths. Very low curve deck overall, so that makes sense. 2 plains and 5 swamps. There are more early black plays and more double black plays than there are early white plays or double white sources. There's no double white overall. It's really just Stratus Fledgling and the Unearths here that demand white mana. Otherwise, Bind Life to Steal asks for double white or double black in some combination, so you're covered on that front. And then Mercenary of Dusk and Past Unresolved demands double black. Rooftop Sling, Sludge Drudge demands black on turn 1. So the heavier lean towards swamps makes sense. 4 copies of Primal Fissure to find those basics. 4 Stark Expanse for more mana fixing. 4 Temple of Origins for more mana fixing. Yeah, this deck is really sweet. Laurel really cooked with this one, and it's such a sweet innovation on the weather package. Up next, we've got Silver running back the Grixis Iviana list from last month with some improvements. We've got 3 Iviana Dragon Tamer. We'll talk about the sideboard package for this first. We've got 1 Guration, 1 Draconis Magistus, 1 Eltanon the Silent Star, 1 Rostabal the Enduring Star, and 1 Asulio the Watchful Star. I believe this is the same Iviana package as before. The only big notable difference is that Eltanon no longer gets to be a flexible board wipe. It is now limited to only permanents mana value 2 or less, though there are still some decks where this can matter. And Iviana provides you the treasures to pay for Path of Stillness. So can be still very accessible. And in a pinch, if Eltanon's a very good creature to cheat into play off of Guration the Stormlord, because it silences your opponent on their next turn. And for the rest of your turn. So Eltanon Guration, still just a nasty pairing, so another good reason to have Eltanon in the sideboard nonetheless. We'll talk about the remaining 10 sideboard slots once we talk about the rest of the deck, of which there are 2 Life Hackers, 1 Warden of Depths, which is very exciting, 3 copies of Lutra Inquisios, and 3 more copies of Draconis Magistus to go with the 1 in the sideboard. Instant Suite is 4 Overrule Wills, and 3 Thistral Charms as your stack interaction, 3 copies of Lunar Awe alongside those Thistral Charms as your targeted removal and instant speed, and then there's a playset of Seafloor Treasures and 2 copies of 3 Become 1 as your draw package alongside the Lutra Inquisos as a draw tool here. And Draconis Magistus gets to join the Overrule Wills as a stack interaction tool. Sorceries are 1 Terminal Impact, 2 copies of Coup d'etat, because Grixis Control does get access to this 3 mana -3/-3 effect. And then a playset of Nightfall, something that we have not got to see a ton of in the main here, but is a very reliably powerful board wipe, and something that you get access to as a Grixis Dragons deck where Jeskai Dragons does not get to lean on this particularly powerful board wipe. Remaining deck is 25 lands. There's 3 islands, 2 swamps, 1 mountain. Playset of Primal Fissures to go find those. None of the ERR fetches otherwise. There's 1 of Rousing Path and 2 Murky Path. Blue is a heavy focus here. Playsets of each of the blue Shock lands and 3 of the Sanguine Palace. And then 1 Chasm of the Silent Covenant. A little harder to have untapped, only 3 islands and the 4 Primal Fissures that can find them, but just a very solid creature land. Not the worst thing in the world to just have this come in tapped, because it is still so powerful as a creature land in terms of what it can do to threaten while not costing you your mana from this for the turn cycle. The remainder of the sideboard, outside of the 5 dragons, is 2 copies of Stag of the Broken Crown to sort of slip some of your top-end instants and sorceries, slip any of your instants and sorceries through counter spells while also letting them have instant speed, so you can Coup d'etat or Nightfall at instant speed. A very powerful thing you can do is you can chant this onto Terminal Impact, a Terminal Impact at instant speed, and because chant is mana you are spending to cast the spell, I do believe chanting Stag onto Terminal Impact does count for the amount of damage Terminal Impact does. So that can be very nice to not eat into your overall mana spent on Terminal Impact while still making it not necessarily uncounterable, but instant speed can be very powerful. The remaining 3 copies of Terminal Impact and the remaining 2 copies of Coup d'etat are also here. And there's 3 copies of Primordial Gateway as the anti-aristocrats tool of choice. Though we have yet to see aristocrats in this field. I am surprised nobody's on Envoy. Everyone is ready for Envoy, but it has yet to make an appearance. Up next, we've got Black-Red Reanimator from Ricky, something that they have been jamming and iterating upon. We've got some new tools here. I do not believe we've seen Cosmic Bounty from this deck before, but it is a card I do have some fondness for. There is playsets of Ignited Soul and Rooftop Slink on the start of the curve, gives you ways to pitch your top-end threats more reliably, and they both can do some nice things on top of that. On the 3-drop slot on curve, there is Fabricated Anomaly, additional ways to sort of dig through your deck, get to the things that you need to get to, and also just let your early game board spiral out of control a little bit. 3 copies of Threadripper as some interaction for the board, while also being a not embarrassing reanimation target in a pinch. Also, removal that dodges duress, which is nice. Speaking of removal that dodges duress, there's also one Nuele Exodus, which can be both a solid edict when you need it to be, and also just a nasty thing to reanimate if you have to reanimate it. Not something that's embarrassing by any measure. And then 3 copies of Privilege Escalation, really the reanimation target of choice since we started seeing Reanimator pop back up in the field. Of course, we have those 3 Cosmic Bounties to help improve how often you can get things from your hand into your graveyard, while also giving you a bit of extra mana to work with. Playset of Terminal Impact to use some of that mana, alongside playset of Reclaim the Fallen as the reanimation tool of choice. You can get something back on turn 4 thanks to that flashback cost. And 2 Coordinated Shots as some flexible burn spells that can leverage all of this deck churning and leverage some of your early 1-drops that might start to be a little less important later on. And then a playset of Shigani Manor Burns to really tie the room together. Can get you to a Reclaim the Fallen on turn 3, can tee up that Reclaim the Fallen if you go turn 1, Rooftop Slink or Ignited Soul, into turn 2, Shigani Manor Burns, have Soul or Slink discard one of either Reclaim the Fallen or your reanimation target. Then on turn 3, you untap with that treasure token, discard a card to exile top 2 cards of your library. If you discard the other of your pair between Reclaim and the reanimation target, that's a turn 3 Reclaim the Fallen flashback, getting back Privilege Escalation, and a turn 3 Privilege Escalation is really scary for a lot of decks. The mana base here is very basic dense, something that I know Ricky is very fond of. 7 mountains, 8 swamps, 1 Primal Fissure, so getting a little bit of basic fetching in here. Otherwise, there's a playset of Temple of Origins and Sanguine Palace, and then 1 copy of Heap Ludicon. This is a deck that Ricky has been doing pretty well with over the last 2 months, so certainly this is not something to sleep on by any measure. And this was something I think Ricky was also jamming a bit last season, so it has been putting in work. Sideboard here is a playset of Exorcist of Errors, as well as 1 Life Hacker and 3 Inner Rings Pupil for when you want to pivot to a bit of a mid-range strategy. Competitive Hedonist can also kind of do that, while also pushing a bit more aggressive. 1 Creation's Combustion gives the deck a bit more removal when needed, and then 3 Crucible of the Burning Sun gives it a way to check other graveyard decks. Although it is not as impactful as it used to be, I do wonder if this wants to be Clash of the Shaded Maw now. Just because Clash of the Shaded Maw does this, I think, a little more impactfully, because it exiles graveyards immediately, and then if you can chip 2 damage to it, it gets to passively do the Crucible effect of exiling things when they're put into a graveyard, and then when it's defeated, it can actually punish your opponent when they have their things get exiled from the battlefield, which is very nice. Not sure if that's something that was on Ricky's mind necessarily, but yeah, Crucible definitely suffering for its nerf last month. This is the first time we've seen it come up all evening, or all day if you aren't experiencing evening right now. But yeah, Black River Animator has absolutely put in some work. I definitely was sleeping on it when Ricky brought it the first time, and Ricky put up like increasingly better results with this deck the more Ricky has gotten to play it. This has a very I think Ricky was putting up good results right out the gate with it, honestly. This deck does put up some work. So yeah, Reclaim the Fallen, Privilege Escalation, it does its job. Specifically, has been doing work even in the wake of the Uldun rotation this season. Because I know Ricky was doing a lot of work when we still had the Rough Rider last season, but this season, in the wake of the Rough Rider rotation, I know Ricky kind of stumbled a little bit in terms of his confidence with the deck overall, but his results have not shown that confidence being shaken by any measure. This deck has still absolutely rocked the format here and there. So yeah. Not surprising to see Ricky playing it. I imagine it will continue to put in good work. Up next, Epid's also going to start dragon posting until GP performance improves. I believe this is card for card the deck that I'm on. Epid has joined me in just net decking what Caillou has played. So this is the third Jeskai Dragon control deck. Epid and I on the exact same track of mind here. We both kind of just looked at Caillou continuing to do well with Dragon Control even after the nerfs took out some of the battle package, and just, yeah. Who needs Ukiu's Crusaris? Iviana kills people. If they cannot stop Iviana, Iviana will end the game. Um, I wish I'd gotten word that this was going to be the deck name scheme, then I would have gotten in on it, but unfortunately I just had to glaze Caillou with my deck name. What a tragedy. Yeah, this is the identical 75, so not much to talk about here. Good deck. Not surprised. Zangi's on band control with these 16 swamps and 3 Karaz observatories and 2 heap ludicons and 2 gallows sprout timbers. So some very powerful band control tools here. Someone was going to get me with this sooner or later, but I caught on. I did pick up on it. This is a more mono black leaning build of the Weathers deck. So it still has the Slinks, Sludge Drudges, Catabolists, and Mercenary of Dusks, and Gloomy Meteorologists, but swaps out the Stratus Fledglings for Exorcist of Errors here. It's a bit more interactive power here. Still got the Bind Life to Steals, still got the Past Unresolved, but replaces the white Unearths for March of the Long Night and Stained Strokes. And there's also 1 copy of Advance of the Hollow Wake. Can make a couple zombie tokens, and then when defeated, if you can defeat it, just cycles damage to your opponent as your creatures die. Can be pretty nice. The sideboard here is 2 Twilight Ambush for aggro matchups, playset of Duress for any matchup where you might want to strip things from your opponent's hand, playset of Astral Displacer to disable any problem spells your opponent might be lining up, and then it's just the black half of the weather package, just the 2 Falling Ashes, 2 Sandstorms, and 1 Shadow Sky, which I think makes sense. Meteorologist is a very powerful card here, but when it's your only way of acclimating, you don't want to devote as much of your sideboard. I think Stratus Fledgling alongside Meteorologist gives more reason to be devoted to more weathers, but when you're just on these, you don't really need much more than that. So yeah, solid little mono black weathers deck. This very solid self-mill graveyard recursion pile. Getting some solid utility out of Karaz Observatory, Heap Ludicon, and even Gallows Sprout Timber, a functionally colorless land in this deck that even turns off Karaz Observatories being untapped. But it's just a really annoying creature land with a lot of solid value. Even does a thing the deck really cares about. It can even take things out of your graveyard so you can get back your Catabolists. Lots of nice little synergies here. So curious to see how this fares, especially compared to the white-black list. Up next, we've got All Who Wander on counter spells. This looks to be a deck with no counter spells. I'm being gaslit by curators. This is medium Boros. This is big Boros here. I say medium. This is just big Boros. We've got Contest Coordinator, Offset Daemon. Coordinator can go find your 2 copies each of the Dutiful Wanderer and Cathella and Light Catalyst. Can go find your Inner Infernos, a card that I started seeing some play in League. Can find your Sealing Strikes. Can't find your Cleansing Starfires, but can find 7 enchantments here. Can find your 3 Atomic Cores. So Contest Coordinator able to get some good value here, and can find some of your Plains lands. Can find your 3 basic Plains, 2 stack Conviviplex. So some consistency boosts from Contest Coordinator here. Also a very good thing to flicker with Dutiful Wanderer. Offset Daemon, not so much. Not that great with Dutiful Wanderer, but this is also just a really brutal Planeswalker on its own right, so she gets to get away with not having as many good flicker targets. Cathella, meanwhile, can just chip away at your opponent's board, can help you defend your own board, and just get you some solid value from your graveyard with... no value from your graveyard with that -X. The only instant or sorcery in the deck is Terminal Impact, which is very bad with Cathella's -X. And there's no instant or sorceries in the sideboard. So yeah, Cathella's just here for that +2 and that 0. Never going to be down-ticking her. Don't really need to. Just 2 -1/-1 counters on a creature, or 2 damage to the opponent's dome, or you just make 2 1/1s that can sit there, chump block, or start attacking your opponent for more consecutive pressure turn after turn as you spit out more tokens. Very good stuff. The Terminal Impacts, of course, very good general flexible removal, especially as you can build up your mana with Shigani Manor Burns, able to create treasures over time. Atomic Core, able to build up charge counters and build up a bunch of mana over time. can also just be a nice check against some of these token decks. You can pop Atomic Core immediately to remove all of these tokens. And then Sealing Strike as removal. Cleansing Starfire can be removal or damage to the opponent's face. Inner Inferno can be some really solid card advantage. Whenever you put a counter on one of your permanents, you get to exile top card of your library. On a permanent, it doesn't have to be your permanents. So whenever you play a Planeswalker, whenever you have Cleansing Strike, deal damage to something. Whenever you have Shinigami Manor Burns at the start of your turn, Inner Inferno can dig really deep. And it's specifically until you next exile a card with Inner Inferno. And because the exile is a May, you can just hold the cards under Inner Inferno until the next time you want to play it. This is something I missed in my set review. But yeah, the fact that Inner Inferno only exiles things when you want it to, while granted only able to do so once each turn, means that you can make sure Inner Inferno both doesn't deck you out, but also holds on to things you'd rather preserve, because it doesn't tell you when you can play the card, it just tells you when you can no longer play the card, and that is when you choose to dig a little deeper. So you get to have a say in when the card under Inner Inferno is no longer necessary. Very powerful consistency tool here. And then Advance the Quiet Moon, more removal alongside the Sealing Strikes. Battles probably going to go down in terms of how many battle removal tools that people are really looking for. And this is just a really powerful Banishing Light effect. People aren't really as equipped to deal with to remove battles as they are enchantments, so gets to get a little more advantage over something like Sealing Strike. And if you can defeat Advance of the Quiet Moon, it lets you just start making 1/1s when your creatures leave. It's also a permanent that enters with counters on it, so that's life gain off of Cleansing Starfire, value off of Inner Inferno. Really good deck. Land base here is 2 Crucible of the Bound Flame, as some solid little creature land here can anthem your board in a pinch, can go really crazy with those Kefela tokens. Dutiful Wanderer having double strike is also really relevant here. Playset of Temple of Origins, 2 stack Conviviplex as the other creature land of choice here. Good to find off of Contest Coordinator. Playset of Windbeaten Stones and Primal Fissure, and then 4 mountains and 3 plains. Sideboard here is a playset of Looming Psyhawk for token matchups, be those token aggro matchups or just slower decks that generate some tokens. This also can slip into the board in the face of counterspells here and there, especially since decks with counterspells do have some incidental token generation. 3 copies of End of Mutations as a strong anti-control tool that is in the format courtesy of the most recent buff patch. Much more relevant tool now that it has a bit more toughness and a much more terrifying damage trigger. 3 copies of Oberus Lay Pilgrim as the artifact and enchantment removal of choice here. Can be found off of Contest Coordinator, can trigger your Cleansing Starfires and Inner Infernos. Just very good utility here. And then it just also gets to gain you some life, make a defender. Oberus is a really good card. I'm surprised that this is the first time we've seen it this month, and I think we've overall just not been seeing Oberus enough. 3 Archival Storage as the Graveyard Hate of choice, which makes sense. This is another thing that Contest Coordinator can find for you. And then 2 Clash at Orith Cross as the board wipe of choice here in the sideboard. No board wipes in the main, but there's so much incidental removal that you don't necessarily need the board wipes in the main. And Clash at Orith Cross not only is another permanent with counters on it, so can trigger your Inner Infernos and your Cleansing Starfires, but that 3 defense trigger, like dealing 2 damage to Clash at Orith Cross, is so trivial, and you just get so much power out of that. It is crazy to me that this was the change that Clash at Orith Cross got, honestly. I think the end step constant token generation was much more powerful as an inevitability engine, but the tokens just coming immediately as 2/2s with Vigilance rather than having to defeat it for them to have 2 power and Vigilance is significant, especially since they hit how well you can cheese the defeating of battles in the most recent patch. So yeah, I think Clash at Orith Cross is a crazy good card still. So not shocked to see All Who Wander on 2 copies of it here. We move away from me being gaslit by curators to see Tremor's Caillou Karaz. Oh, is this Oh, this is Karaz Monument. I'm not being gaslit. I immediately started thinking of Karaz Observatory or the 1 minute 1 1 in black. But no, this is Karaz Monument. This is one of Caillou's other brews that has been seeing some play both in Caillou's hands and some other folks here and there. I know Orchidea did a lot of experimentation with this shell at the start of the season, and Caillou definitely started picking it up more and more later on. This is a red-white artifact and enchantments deck, leaning on Venture Capitalist to find some of your artifacts as you might need them, though not a ton overall. There's also Fabricated Anomaly, no longer an enchantment, which is actually relevant for this deck in particular, but does still spit out an artifact token. Containment Seraph as a one-of artifact here that you can find off of Venture Capitalist. And then Offset Daemon as a playset because it's a very powerful enchantment creature. This all coalesces towards Karaz Monument, which builds up charge counters as your enchantments enter, and then whenever you have an artifact enter, you can remove a charge counter from Karaz Monument to draw a card and have it become a 3/3 creature with flying until end of turn. So the primary value generation here is you just have a bunch of enchantments enter, and then every single artifact you have enter, you don't even necessarily need it to stop being a creature. You can just draw a bunch of cards and peel a bunch of counters off of Karaz Monument to dig very deep. I was certainly a naysayer of this deck early on, but though I have yet to play against it myself, I have slowly been turning on Karaz Monument in favor of it. Just a solid value engine if you can build around it, and it helps that a lot of cards incidentally do play into that plan. Shikari Manor Burns, another really strong enchantment to put into play alongside it, as is Gone Pickin', because it is an artifact and an enchantment at the same time. And just definitely one of the first times we're getting to see the buffed berry tokens. Very good here. Darkstar Severance, another strong card here. Artifact plus enchantment, because it is an enchantment that makes a chart token. So that is the immediate free guaranteed draw off of Karaz Monument. And then at the start of combat on your turn, you can pop your useless tokens to make 3/1s with Trample and Haste. And then one copy of Panic here, just as a bit of removal when you need it to be. There's also one each of Stella's Journal and Golden Bloom of the Silenced as utility and draw as draw and utility rather respectively. More tutor targets off of the Venture Capitalist for sure. And that is all backed up by a playset of Terminal Impacts and 3 Fateful Ascents as more removal. There is also 1 Warpway Rings here, which is not only something you can find off of Venture Capitalist, but is also a fetch land that can draw you a card with Karaz Monument and Animate Monument if you need it to, which is pretty nice. Otherwise, the other 23 lands here are 2 Crucible of Bound Flame. Once again, if you can just push wide enough, this gets to push a lot of bonus power onto the board. 4 Plains helps us enter untapped a little more reliably. 2 Mountains as well. There's a playset of Temple of Origins, playset of Windbeaten Stones, playset of Primal Fissure. There's 2 Stack Conviviplex here. Also makes Crucible untap more often. And then there's 1 Torrid Path. I will say, I still stand by my sentiment that I think Stack Conviviplex looks a little worse as of late, because I think 3 Toughness is just such a real vulnerability. I also think this is true of any of the leveling lands that just sit around with 2 power or 2 toughness, because it's just so easy for Twilight Ambush to ruin one of your lands, and Twilight Ambush destroying a land is just such a powerful line when you have to invest mana into that land being a creature in the first place. But I do think Stack and Viplex gets a little bit better with the nerf to Uki's Crusaris specifically. So certainly something that benefits this card a little bit. In the sideboard, there's 2 copies of Looming Psyhawk, which gets a little more reliable, courtesy of Venture Capitalist. As is true with every other appearance of it, just a solid anti-token strategy tool. Helia Leyspire is a very good graveyard hate tool. End of Mutations, a very good anti-control tool. Oberys, I'm very happy to see this even just as a one-of. Very powerful artifact and enchantment removal option. The 4th copy of Fateful Ascent here makes sense. Playset of Deafening Clarion for aggro matchups. 2 Crumbling Tower for some additional value generation as needed. And then 1 Archival Storage as another graveyard hate tool that you can find off of your Venture Capitalists. Yeah, this deck looks sweet. This is the first deck I can confidently say I know is a Caillou list without it being the Jeskai Dragon Control list. And yeah, my sentiment stands even with my deck list being specifically shouting out the Jeskai Dragon Control list. Kayu's a good deck builder. Kayu's a really good deck builder, and I'm really happy that Kayu's been around more often this season to be able to engage in the format more. It is frightening to see that Kayu has successfully locked in for Worlds, because Kayu is a formidable Worlds contender, but that just means I got to lock in harder next month as well. And whoever among you gets that last desired qualification slot at the end of this GP, may you also fare well into Kayu. Moving on from Tremor's list, we've got Platy People on Solidarity, a deck that has started seeing some resurgence. I believe Matalonian, or it might just be Matt proper. I'm scrolling up in the Decklists channel right now because I know it's just Matt proper, not Matalonian. My apologies on that. Matt has been pushing to really bring the Solidarity aggro deck back into the forefront. Rage Cloak Shifter, Vanguard Recruit, and that's really all you need. What if your 1-drops could generate Orcish or Goblin Oriflammes, or Orcish Oriflamme tokens, really, because they're the same card. Oriflamme's a very strong enchantment when you're on an aggro strategy, and not having to pay additional mana alongside your threats to get them is really powerful. So you've got a lot of 1-drops here with very diversified types. Coytail Mare is a menacing, hasting Merfolk Noble, 2 types we won't see repeated here. Scorching Gecko, also a hasty 1/1 for 1 Salamander Spirit. Arid Outrider, a hasty 1/1 Human Scout that even gets a power buff if you have a token, which the Oriflammes, the Solidarity tokens, are tokens. Rage Cloak Shifter, a non-hasty 1/1 for 1, but has Solidarity baked in and has Fire Breathing while also picking up additional types. It's a Shapeshifter Shaman as well. So that is 4 different cards with 2 unique types. 5th card with 2 unique types here in Vanguard Recruit. 1/1 Goblin Soldier with Menace and Solidarity. And then there's Proclaimer of Blooming Wing. 1/1 with Fairy Scout with Decoy to make another 1/1 token that's an illusion. Now, granted, Decoy will not factor into your Solidarity count because you need to declare as attackers these 6 or more unique types, but even then, Proclaimer is just really good with the Solidarity tokens, so that is enough on its own. There's even Emberforged Forerunner, does overlap as a human, specifically with the Arid Outrider, but Berserker is just a nice additional type here. It's another 1/1 for 1 with haste, and the Rapture mechanic lets it come back the first time it gets blocked and killed. And then at the 2-drop slot is just Cash Thrasher. Very good card that gets to leverage the very low curve of this deck, and because it's another hasty creature, leverages the Solidarity tokens very reliably, because it generates these memory tokens turn by turn. It can dig through your deck very effectively, since it's very hard for your deck to ever need to spend more than 2 or 3 mana. Sorry, more than 1 or 2 mana off of whatever you're getting off of these memory tokens. So it's often just going to be 3 or 4 mana to sacrifice and play whatever you've cached. And the first strike just means it is very annoying to block, especially as you start stacking Solidarity tokens. Very strong aggro plan here. There's also a playset of Shocks as some solid cheap burn. Playset of Edgeland Pledges to get some Solidarity tokens without having to jump through all of the hoops, while also getting some additional flexibility. You can also shock for an additional red, you can tap 3 creatures for an additional blue, or make a 1/1 soldier with haste for an additional green. And then finally, there's 2 copies of Ragtag Squad here to make a pair of 1/1s, 1 with haste, 1 with trample, and both getting a creature type of your choice, so can also assist you in rushing Solidarity quickly and consistently. Mana base here is 20 lands. There's actually a forest and an island despite everything that are casting for red because of those Edgeland Pledges. In fact, there are some duels here. There's 4 mountains, 4 Primal Fissures. The duels here are 2 Meandering Path, prioritizing the green mana for the token generation off of Edgeland Pledge, and then 4 of each of the red Shocks for the relevant colors into Edgeland Pledge. Doesn't look like this is mattering into the sideboard too much. Oh, it also matters for Purifier of Dawnbloom Grove. Sorry, so this the green sources here between Meandering Path, Urban Jungle, and the one basic forest also make Purifier of Dawnbloom Grove more reliable as an artifact and enchantment removal tool out of the sideboard. Also, this deck being so low curve, it's very easy to redeploy whatever you reprieve, potentially even attack with it the turn that you do so because of the fact that so many of these 1-drops have haste. Dark Sun Migrant, just a very solid aggro tool in general. Surprised it's not in the main, but I suppose when you're keeping the curve so low, Cash Thrasher is the more desirable 2-drop here. So if you need to kind of push the curve a little higher, Dark Sun Migrant's a great way to justify that. Jericho Ageless Wanderer is a very solid aggro planeswalker here, and then Frag and Advance of Fire and Faith are the additional removal spells here alongside the Shocks and Edgeland Pledges. Yeah, good stuff. Up next, we've got Cat and Trees. What is this a tribute for me? Sorry, that is just an awful reading there. What is this? A tribute for me? A tribute for the Token King? Cat is the known token player and is playing the green-white tokens deck with Syra and Honesty here. All right, we've got the Vow's Reflection token deck. I believe this is something that Caillou was cooking a bit as well. So playset of Huskforger Acolyte and Kitsune Matriarch on 1, playset of Skyray Tender on 2, alongside the Sanctum of Repressions and Vow's Reflection, Vow being particularly good with these creatures that spit out tokens when they enter, like Skyray Tender. At 3, there is Syra Blade of Memory, which cares about having at least 2 things enter each turn so you can get some value, and ideally 3 things entering each turn, so you can get some counters on your board. Which is especially good with Commander of the Vow, which spits out 2 tokens when it enters, and Survivors of the New World, which does the same. And there's also 2 copies of Aloris the Pathfinder. Both do generate some tokens over time as he swings in, and also if he dies, he just makes a gigantic stat bomb. And then there's also Honesty, which does the same thing as Syra, really rewards you for putting a bunch of things into play, and makes it harder for your opponent to block you. Mana base here is 7 plains to 1 forest, though there is a Huskforger Acolyte here. Matriarch is the more valuable 1-drop on 1, and then Skyray Tender is just such a important card to be able to cast reliably, so the heavier plains lean here makes sense. Though Huskforger is not impossible to get into play, there is 4 Primal Fissures to find the forest as needed, and there's also a playset each of Thicketed Path, Verdant Sanctum, and Temple of Origins, so Acolyte can still come down on turn 1 pretty consistently. And Acolyte's really good with all of these 3-drops that you might want to rush out. Except for Honesty. Can't get Honesty into play on turn 2. Sideboard here is a playset of Purifier of Dawnbloom Groves. It can do something similar to Vow's Reflection of just picking up your solid utility creature, token generation creatures and then replay them while also removing an artifact or enchantment. That's also true of Sanctum Repression, which is very nice in this shell. Fateful Ascent is just good catch-all removal, as well as Casus Belli, which does the removal thing while also antheming your board. Golden Bloom of the Silence for general permanent checking, and then also on Crucible here, despite its nerf. Very interesting that people are still playing. This is now 2 people playing Crucible despite the nerf. I suppose the primary mode here is still very powerful because it is 2 generic mana for this effect, and certainly white does not get access to this at 2 mana like black does with Clash at the Shaded Maw. But yeah, very interesting to see Crucible still getting played here, and we are coming to the end of this stream with once again no Aristocrats decks so far, and I suspect we might not have any Aristocrats decks in the field altogether once again, which is crazy to me because Aristocrats still has so much of its strength, and it seems like people are more and more not really planning for it in the main, and really running some not necessarily all-consuming checks to Aristocrats. Some people are going completely without checks to Aristocrats, so I'm very surprised that Aristocrats are seemingly completely absent here. But yeah, solid green-white aggro deck makes sense. And then we got 2 more here. CFT Socks Blue-Red Prowess. On a playset of Cascade Channeler, as well as 1 Emblazoned Prophet on the main, on the 1-drop slot on the curve, and then a playset of Dream Physician on the 2-drop slot. 2 mana 3/4 with Ward 1. Whenever an opponent pays Dream Physician's ward cost, sacrifice Dream Physician. Interesting here. Very interesting. So just kind of leveraging this as an annoying 3/4 where your opponent does have to at least pay the 1 additional mana, though that guarantee for the removal spell, though it at least guarantees the removal spell gets through. Instant base here is a playset each of Shock and Discern, as well as one of each Forced Ejection and Negate. Sorceries are a playset of Stargazing, as well as 3 Realm Reaps, which is a very solid impulse draw tool, honestly. Something that I'm surprised we haven't seen more of. There's also a playset of Research Grant to get some more value over time as needed. Copy up your spells when you can flip it, and with the deck keeping the curve low, copying those spells is not going to be too difficult. And then there's Advance of Rune and Whisper as additional bounce spells alongside Forced Ejection. And then Clash at Mistrit Vale as the last token generation, way to benefit you casting all of these spells. Get 2 damage to this with a Shock, and then you just start prowessing up all of your creatures, double prowess on your Cascade Channelers, prowess on your Dream Physicians, prowess on Emblazoned Prophet is really powerful. So yeah, there's a very solvable blue-red Spellslinger deck. Have not seen a ton of tempo as of late, so getting to see this a bit more this month is very exciting. We've got 22 lands here with 4 Misty Peak, 2 Rousing Path, 4 Temple of Origins, and 4 Primal Fissure, with a single copy of Mountain versus 7 Islands, which makes sense. Channeler, Dream Physician, Discern, Ejection, Negate, Stargazing, Research Grant, then the battles, a lot of reasons to want to have the blue early specifically. Sideboard is on 2 Wildfang Cavaliers here. Very interesting to see what this is. Very curious to see what this is for specifically. Not many things that get to attack. Nothing in this deck that really gets to attack twice, but it's just a nice nice annoying threat that you have to kill twice in combat in order for it to really properly be dealt with. Just need to kill it twice in general. 2 copies of Flutter, both as anti-removal tool and as a piece of graveyard hate, though I think Flutter is a little bad with Dream Physician in particular, because if you give something hexproof in response to the ward trigger, I do believe your opponent can still choose to pay the ward even with their spell fizzling, courtesy of the hexproof, which would allow them to still remove the Dream Physician. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that is how it works. The spell would fizzle, I believe, instantaneously. But the ward trigger would still go on the stack and would still be allowed to be paid into to remove the thing. But also just good flexible protection spell for your 1-drops while being graveyard hate in a pinch. The additional 3 copies of Negate here for more non-creature based matchups. 2 copies of Saboteur's Immolation as a bit of board interaction, mass board interaction for some of these aggro matchups, some of these token matchups in particular, though also good into the Solidarity deck. Certainly the fact that Cascade Channeler can be scaled out of range of Saboteur's Immolation is a very nice bonus. 1 copy of Frag as additional targeted removal and artifact removal when needed. The last copy of Realm Reap is nice here. 2 copies of Collector's Item is a nice bit of removal here. And then 2 copies of Advance of Fire and Faith for the little 2-for-1s when you can get it. Also not an awful thing to defeat. Haste is especially good here with things like Cascade Channeler and Emblazoned Prophet. Alrighty. And I believe that brings us to our last deck of the stream. We have been rocketing through these. We've got PTM also on Solidarity. Looks like this is a slightly different configuration. Not too different. From what we saw before. There is no Emberforged Forerunner. There is no Ragtag Squad. We're kind of keeping things a little more tuned in. Arid Outriders, Coytail Murs, Scorching Geckos all still here. Rage Cloak Shifter and Vanguard Recruit still here. Proclaimer still here. Cash Thrasher still here. A lot of the best creatures, all of the 4-ofs in the other deck still kicking around here. Playset of Shock and playset of Edgeland Pledge also still present, but swapping out the awkward 2-ofs from the other build for 3 copies of Bleeding Out as some additional burn spell that can also potentially push damage to the face, and 3 copies of Gift of Inspiration as a bit of additional value generation when needed. You can either play a card that you exile off the top of your library, which we talked about with Cash Thrasher is already pretty reliable, or you could just make some 1/1 constructs, which are very good when you're spitting out Solidarity tokens. Mana base has no time for Primal Fissures. This is 18 lands instead of 20, 5 mountains, 3 rousing paths, 2 meandering paths, and then 4 of each of the shock lands. A slightly intensified skew towards blue here, recognizing the value in tapping blockers with Edgeland Pledge. Sideboard here has no room for green or blue cards here. There's 2 Stellar Flare for more mid-rangey removal, 3 Frag, also mid-ranging removal while checking artifacts, 2 copies of Conscript to really put in some hurt, clear away 2 blockers while also pushing in with one of them in a pinch. Very good against aggro decks, solid against mid-range decks. You can target your opponent's 3-drop and your 1-drop to haste out a 1-drop that might not have it while getting a 3-drop out of the way, or you can just take a single creature, mana value 4 or less, and swing with it, which is also very good. 1 more copy of Gifted Inspiration to finish out the playset. 1 Scathing Remarks to sort of punish Spellslinger decks, which is a pretty heads-up call given the appearance of some Spellslinger decks in this field, while also shutting off Life Gain. Not as prominent with the hit to the Life Gain package this month. I don't think there's really any deck that piles on the Life Gain, but certainly does incidentally punish things like Offset Daemon, which can be pretty valuable sometimes. 2 copies of Golden Bloom of the Silenced to disable some troublesome permanents as needed, and then a playset of Advance of Fire and Faith for those aggro matchups. Just split up your burn can be very, very desirable. And yeah, that is going to bring us to a close on the Decklists stream of Grand Prix Neo Stehlia. Really, really rushed through it this time around. Some solid double ups here. I am immediately locked in for the Caillou net decking mirror. Epid and I on the exact identical 75, identical 60, identical sideboards. Will be very interesting to see how we both choose to navigate this. Talking about matchups here, we've got Chip versus Opakana. Chip on that Teamer Gaigeka deck versus Opakana again on the red-white tokens list. I think the mid-range tokens list looked really nice last month. A bit awkward into some of the control matchups, but does try to do what it can to deal with control a bit more effectively. Specifically, very awkward in the face of some of those green-white decks, which this is not going into. Chip does not have a ton of stuff that can very comfortably block some of these tokens. Savvy Smith can kind of do the job in a pinch. Can make the construct tokens as well to put out some blockers there. But Gaigeka is really going to seemingly be the thing that carries Chip across the finish line in this matchup, though Clash can also put in some work in that regard. Not sure which way that matchup will skew, though. I think that sideboarding might get a little better with Advanced Fire and Faith, maybe? No, the sideboard's not super well positioned for the token matchup, whereas Opakana's sideboard does get to pick up some more checks into the targeted removal with Shatter the Sigil, can pick up some additional checks for things with Doctrine of Cleansing Flames. I'm not sure too many. Oh, I also missed that Opakana was on the Crucibles here. So I guess there were 3 players playing Crucible still. Yeah, I'll be curious to see how that matchup plays out, because I'm not sure I know which deck looks favored there. Platy versus Itai here. Solidarity aggro versus black-red colorless count to 4. Yeah, I think this deck actually looks very solidly positioned. It's gonna have to really struggle to get those 4 drops into play turn 3, because the Solidarity deck just pushes so much damage so quickly. But I think if Itai gets a chance to get their footing under them, it's going to be very difficult for Platy to suddenly turn things around. This deck can just kind of gradually lock out the game. And not a ton of life gain burst, but Celise might be a very important card in this matchup, especially because of the fact that that passive end step trigger draining your opponent for 3 when they have an even number of cards in their hand it's very likely your opponent drops down to 0 cards in hand very rapidly, where Solis starts to just punish them at your end step for it. Upticking to draw you cards and lose life is not the best thing in the world, but Solis could still be very important to just pad your life total in that matchup. And things like Waypoint Artillery, creating some incidental blockers, can be pretty nice as well, because all you need is 1 point of damage to deal with some of these creatures. And also, it's a case where Terminal Impact looks pretty good. Terminal Impact for 1, dealing 1 damage is pretty solid. Advancer Fire and Faith looks really good out of the sideboard. Nightfall, probably a little slow. Twilight Ambush is going to be pretty good, because even if they start building up over 2 power, they're going to have 1 toughness or 2 toughness pretty much always. So yeah, I think Itai's got a decently favorable sideboard. It's just going to be really hard to build up for Itai in the face of all of this raw aggression. Though I do think one boon for Itai as well is the risk of drawing this forest or island. Very small risk overall, but it is a risk nonetheless, and one that PTM's build of the deck does not share. For Catalyst and Viola, Catalyst's funky Teamer subroutine deck up against Viola on that Jund Golden Age mid-range deck. Yeah, I think the Golden Age deck looks sick. I think this deck looks very well positioned into the field. It looked pretty well positioned last time. Just enough annoying singular threats that you just have to constantly check the things that they're playing. And the threat of Golden Age just incidentally flipping and starting to let these threats get replayed is very real. You do have to put a clock on this deck, or it will just run you over. And I don't know if Catalyst's deck puts a massive clock. I haven't seen this deck in action, though, so certainly I could be wrong. It is possible that Iterate just spits out so much stats onto a robot out of nowhere that it just gets to push a ton of damage suddenly. So we'll see. Again, me and Epid, we're on the exact same 75. I think it's going to come down a lot to matchup knowledge and variance. What cards we draw, how we choose to play the cards we draw, how we choose to mulligan, which one of us gets to go first in game 1. I think Epid and I are going to have a very interesting mirror here. I cannot say I'm enthusiastic about it, but I will do what I can to be prepared for it. Kumrak versus Ricky here. Golgari midrange versus Black-Red Reanimator. Tale as old as time. Reanimator can definitely scam out some wins if left unchecked, but I do think mid-range getting access to things like Blightstalker has a bit of a natural advantage into the scammy element of the Reanimator shell. Now, fortunately for Ricky, the Reanimator shell that he is on does have some real grind potential to it. I do think, however, that things like Exorcist of Errors, Innering's Pupil, Solis leave Kumrak looking a bit well-positioned into the grind, which is kind of the ideal for Kumrak's deck, pretty much. Program Pursuer, Lifehacker, able to just buy a lot of time, dig really deep as you need them to. And I think the sideboard here, the Go Blanks, the Duresses, the additional copies of Solis even, can just absolutely bury Ricky here. But I would not count Ricky out by any measure. Again, this Reanimator deck can absolutely scam some wins out of nowhere. Crush versus All Who Wander is interesting. I do think that I like the red-white deck in a vacuum here. However, this is one matchup where no main deck board wipes is really going to hurt into all of these stat bombs off of Honesty. The lack of Syra here does make Honesty a little more singularly reliant on really carrying the weight of these token bombs, especially since it's really the only thing amplifying the damage here. But yeah, this deck can absolutely spit out some problematic permanents out of nowhere, and the Looming Cyhawks in the main do get to cause some incidental problems for All Who Wander here and there. Shuts off Offset Daemon, can shut off the token mode from Kefella, force Kefella to have to deal 2 damage to it, rather. Shuts off Shagani Manor Burns incidentally, can incidentally shut off the defeated condition on Advance of the Quiet Moon. So it's not the most important card in the matchup, something I could totally see Crush boarding out after game 1, but does have some incidental value in the pre-board game. I do think overall, though, All Who Wander gets to have the edge here just by way of so much removal, so much life gain, so much value generation. Atomic Core is monumental into this matchup, and getting to have 3 of those in the main is a big deal. Between Zangy and Cat and Tree, this one's tough. I think the mono black Weathers deck looks really, really sweet. I think it has a lot of grind to it. But the green white tokens decks have also absolutely proven themselves to have some real grind. And Vow's Reflection is especially good into grindy matchups here. I think the lack of the life gain component outside of Syra might hurt a bit more in this matchup, but Syra does still gain you a lot of life. It's the draw card and counter modes that are only once over the course of the turn. The life gain always happens for each creature that enters, so that can pad your life total quite a solid deal here. And that might really matter in the face of, not all who wanders here, in the face of, Gloomy Meteorologist, Catabolist, even Advance of the Hollow Wake, just pushing so much damage turn after turn after turn. That life gain might be very, very significant. I'm also going to watch this matchup with some bated breath. I do not feel comfortable making a call on who's favored. PTM versus CFT Sock, another classic matchup. Mono red aggro versus blue red tempo. I do not know how I am comfortable saying this matchup will go. I think Negate and things like Forced Ejection look a little awkward. The playset of Shocks definitely swings things in CFT Sock's favor a bit here. The Advance of Fire and Faiths in the sideboard are pretty nice. The Saboteur's Immolation is really big in the post board. So yeah, CFT Sock definitely has some really key sideboard cards for this matchup. Though I do also think that PTM gets to leverage some value through things like Conscript, maybe even Scathing Remarks. So certainly PTM, Advance of Fire and Faith, very good into this deck as well. So PTM has some very real plays into the blue-red tempo deck as well. I don't think I'm comfortable saying who's going to win there. I think there's strong plays on both sides. Prov versus Scribble. I think Scribble's mono green deck is very exciting here, and certainly Scribble has shown themselves to be particularly savvy with cards of their own design. Solitaire cards in Scribble's hand have been doing very well, especially last month. They certainly smoked my ass in the GP, and then they won the Eternal Exhibition with a mostly standard deck, mostly leaning on Solitaire, the Solitaire polymorph plan with just good token generators from REV's history. I would not be surprised to see Scribble just do really well with Almanor once again after winning with it last month in the Eternal Exhibition. That being said, I do think that this Penwrath Dispatcher Revolt of the Palace deck is so brutal when you don't have ways to really check them on the board. And certainly this mono green deck is not one well positioned to check the opponent's board. So it is going to be just sort of a race for stats on board and potentially hitting a board stall. But I do think that Prov's going to be a bit better at punching through board stalls courtesy of Revolt of the Palace and some actual removal here. And just some properly spooky threats like Ironback Tyke, Rosin, Clad Guilt, Penwrath Dispatcher, Fabricated Anomaly even. And Genotype Splicer, really key in this matchup. Getting to just teach your creatures flying to get over the mono green board is going to be pretty phenomenal. So I would not be surprised to see Prov, for instance, boarding in the second Genotype Splicer in this matchup because of the board stall threat that is on offer here. For H-Squid versus Caillou, that is the white-black Weathers deck versus Jeskai Dragon Control. I'm inclined to give this to the Dragon deck because I think the Dragon deck is just strong. But I do think the Weather deck can pull off some real shenanigans here. And one of the things that the Dragon deck is not necessarily as prepared for is there's not a lot of stuff dedicated to the sideboard for Graveyard Hate. There's just the two Helia Lay Spires. A very real way to check the Weather deck, for sure. But when that is the only Graveyard Hate, it's kind of hard to punish things like Gloomy Meteor, hard to punish things like Catabolist, Bind Life to Seal, Too Late for Grace, Thorn and Trial. So I think I'm inclined to still give it to the control deck here, but I will be interested to see how this matchup plays out. With Caillou being the only Dragon Control player, the Jeskai Dragon Control player, to not be stuck in a mirror. Though Silver also repping Dragon Control here up against Tremor. I don't know how this is going to play out. I think the Cross deck is really strong into something like Dragon Control. Monument is just something that is hard to incidentally check. The Jeskai decks do have access to Fateful Ascent, which can check Cross Monument, but Silver is on the one build that can't, and in fact, Black just can't check enchantments at all. So this is a deck that cannot check Karaz Monument until it becomes a creature. Certainly, when Karaz Monument becomes a creature, something like the Grixis deck does get to start hitting it with things like Lunar Awe, Thistral Charm. Those hitting 3 damage specifically are very relevant. And 3 become 1 can also flash out a coup d'etat or a nightfall in a pinch to punish the Cross Monument as well. So when the opponent goes to get some value off of Monument, it will become vulnerable to a lot of this interaction. But Monument dodges Iviana, which is pretty key here. So we'll see how that matchup plays out as well. I am inclined to once again give it to the Dragon deck overall because I think Iviana Control is just such a strong archetype right now, as evidenced by the fact that it is the most dominant deck in the field. 4 players on Iviana Control overall, 3 Jeskai decks, and 1 Grixis deck. Silver still determined to prove Grixis as the superior archetype over Jeskai. And certainly with the absence of things like Ukus Crusaris, there is more in favor of the Grixis shells right now, though I think I still remain resolute as Epid and Caillou are. The Jeskai decks just look so good. White offers Offset Daemon, Fateful Ascent, Deafening Clarion, Clash at Orith Cross. Like, those are the reasons to be on Jeskai instead of Grixis, and I think those are really strong reasons. Certainly, though, time will tell on which build is more superior, and certainly if Silver climbs up into finals and makes a solid run of it, in the face of 3 of us repping the Jeskai build, that would be a really strong statement in favor of the Grixis build. So, yeah, I'm inclined to give the slight benefits to Silver here over Tremor, but as with any of my matchup predictions, variance is as it does, and anything could happen. I am going to refresh here just to see if any matches have played. Oh, we've already got 2 results here. CFT Sock actually beating PTM here. Yeah, I was very hesitant to call it on one way or another, and sure enough, CFT Sock seemingly having navigated this matchup very comfortably. Not so comfortably. Both of these are 2-1s, so CFT Sock getting some trouble from PTM, but ultimately losing out. And then Catalyst on the subroutine deck. It's very cute, but again, I am very confident that the Jund mid-range deck just looks so good. Though also, this Tamer deck did take a game off of Viola, so for as funky as some of these strategies may look, obviously this is a deck that can absolutely push a ton of strength into play out of nowhere. For it to take a game off of this Jund deck, I have to believe that this deck has some real weight behind it. So all of the decks in this field look pretty strong. Lots of very spicy strategies, lots of interesting 2-ofs, and then, of course, Jeskai Control, once again, representing itself as one of the most heavily played archetypes in the format, and I imagine end results over the course of this GP will probably reinforce why it is heavily played. Though with 3 of us in the field, us running into mirror matches is more likely, and in those cases, it will be interesting to see where those mirror matches might hurt us overall. So, this has been a fun stream for everyone. Hope you all are excited to get into the GP. For folks who are also excited for other stuff with the format, I'm excited to dig into the Curator's Cube as well, though I will not be doing any video coverage for that. I'll just be kind of enjoying it as I go. Also, for anyone who is a set designer looking to get into Revolution, of course, we are on the last week before submissions close. If you have not gotten your matches necessary to get your set submitted, please do so. And also, listen to what the curators have asked for as far as submission documents go. Helping out the curators with all of the necessary resources, especially in such a time-intensive rotation as the May rotation is now become with 2 sets rotating in. Giving them the grace of getting a better read on your sets is really important, and gearing up for that is going to be really important. So I'm going to be doing my part to be ready for the set submission, and I hope everyone else submitting does the same. So, with all of that out of the way, this has been a very fun decklist stream. I'm excited to see how the GP pans out. And I'll see you all in the Revolution chat in the meantime. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.